fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back again. That was my fishing rod arm there. Talking about rods versus reels. This comes up all the time. We've done some discussions about this. We thought we were pretty clear, but we have many members that said, oh man, you guys need to reiterate that. And I didn't even think about that. I don't know why I keep spending more on my reel than my rod. So we're going to do, this will be kind of a brief one. And we're going to highlight all the reasons why you should almost always, unless you really just want to have that one fancy reel like I do, the $800 reel. But in every other case, you should always spend more money on your rod over your reel. So Luke, why is that?
Yeah, this is for inshore saltwater fishing, and
Yes.
and it's in particular for spinning tackle. That's what we found just after a lot of testing, that I was a total bait casting person only, and until I started getting schooled by people who were using spinning gear with light braided line, they could just cast further, right? As simple as that. You can cast the lighter lures or even light bait, the free line white bait, way further than you can with bait casting, and just more efficiently. And so like now that spinning tackle is good, like spinning tackle is actually really good and is better at being resistant to salt exposure. So you can get better performance. It'll last longer. And you can just flat out just catch a bunch of fish. And so spinning tackle is great. And so unlike bait casting, the spinning reel, it doesn't really do much for the cast, right? Because all it really is it just gets out of the way. So all that really happens for the casting is where you flip the bill open. Oh, got the flame shetty flying around. Is all it's doing is it's just trying to get everything out of the way. And it's really about the casting is really about the line that you have. So I actually recommend focus mostly on the rod, number one, and then your line, because the line is what controls your casting distance. And then thirdly is the reel. So I actually put it at number three. Obviously, you're going to spend more money on your reel than your line. But as far as just the priorities to make sure you have the right specs, that's really the priority as far as inshore saltwater fishing, and especially if you're using artificial lures, because casting is everything. Casting is key. It's all about the benefit with lures where you can literally catch more fish more consistently than live bait. It's a numbers game. You can cover water quickly. You're not spending time and effort catching live bait, keeping them alive, and all that stuff. You're literally just out there fishing, covering ground. The entire portion of your fishing day is actually actively fishing. And if you do it properly and you can choose some good spots, you can consistently catch some really nice fish.
Yeah. And, our first 50 episodes, we're on episode 300 and something now, but first 50 episodes, we interviewed a lot of kind of the top influencers as fishing guides. We had, Tom Rowland and Sia Richardson, Blackneck, Captain Peter Deeks, Captain Jod Owens, a lot of great guides. And we always ask them like, hey, what's the number one mistake that you see on your boat? And do you remember what it was, Luke?
It was casting.
It was 100% casting, but they didn't even think twice about it.
Yeah, no hesitation. It was immediate casting. Even when I take out people, I've taken out a lot of friends for years, and even taking out members and people new to fishing, people who've been fishing for 30 plus years. I immediately know who's going to catch the most fish when we're out there in the water, when there's a group of people, and it's right. Like 99% of the time, it's whoever can cast the best, whoever can cast the furthest and the most accurately. Right. It is just so important. And it doesn't get nearly the attention it needs. Most people are so worried about what lure they have or whatever. Is it the right color? It's really you just need to get a decent lure in front of the fish's face, and that's what's going to work.
And this just goes with live bait as well, because we've been on like with Peter Deeks, who usually fishes mostly live bait, and the same thing happens. It's he who can cast the most accurate and farthest is usually going to catch the most fish. And here's maybe where we really need to hammer this home. Guess what actually does the casting? The rod. It's not the reel. And not one of these guides, and we ask it even when we hang out with guides or on the boat with guides, and they always they keep going back, man. They don't know how to use that rod. And you need to have a nice rod. And I've seen some members recently that have always gone real expensive on the reels. Guess who else did that? Yours truly. For many, many years, I was like, oh, I got to buy the fancy reel. And the rod was kind of an afterthought. And I've seen some members here recently that finally had that aha moment, like, man, I'm not getting the casting that I should. They see someone else like, why are they casting 15 feet farther than me every time? And they finally upgrade and get a nice, $180, $200 rod. I don't think you need a $400 rod or five. I mean, some of those things are obnoxious. I don't think you need one of these custom $800 rods. I think at some point you waste your money, but getting a $200 rod, that is game changing. And it all of a sudden you feel like, holy smokes, I have power. Like I have power I did not have before. I can do things and make casts that I did not have before. Luke and I used to both play tennis. Some of you are golfers. Just imagine if you're a tennis player, remember like Luke going from like an old crappy kid racket or even like a wooden racket, like our grandfather used to, make us hit with. And all of a sudden we went to like this nice Prince graphite or whatever. And it was like, holy smokes, like open up a whole new world. Now I'm acing people, right? Versus like, and the same with this, the strings is kind of like your line. I mean, it's a massive difference if you're playing tennis with an old crappy 50-year-old racket and old strings versus a brand new, super state-of-the-art light racket with brand new strings on it. Same with golfers, right? Think about using an old school crappy wooden driver that's just all out of whack versus some brand new massive head on the driver. I mean, it's night and day difference. And it's the same thing for a rod.
And I just wanted to correct something. You mentioned that the better rods give more power. That's not necessarily true.
I'm talking about powers and confidence power. I'll be very clear. It gives you more power. Like, man, I feel like I can actually go out there and kick some butt fishing. This has nothing to do with power action. This is, thank you for clarifying. This is like, man, because that guy said, he's like, man, I feel like I'm a new fisherman. I feel powerful. So very, very clear on that point. Yes, you will feel the difference.
And so, I mean, so you're probably asking, okay, like what does it even provide? So we'll just kind of do like a high level on the mechanics. So it's very easy. I feel like we all done it, and a lot of people still do. Is it's easy to think that the reel is the more important one because there's more parts to it, right? It's a more complex item. And the rod, hey, it's just a fishing rod, right? Like, I used to use
just a stick with some guides on it.
I used to use bamboo and catch a bunch of panfish out in the little creek. But it's not. The rod is actually pretty complex. When you actually get into the nits and grits of having the blank that has the power, the right power and action combination. And so power, for those who don't know, it's the bend. It's how much effort does it take to bend the rod. That's power, and action is where on the rod blank does it bend. And so it's just very important is to have the right specs based on the lure or baits or whatever you're going to be throwing. So just want to make sure that that's the reason why it's rare that there's a one size fits all for everything, because it depends on if you're, doing some inshore fishing with lures like soft plastics, or if you're throwing on the beach with those big 3-ounce weights, right? You're not going to you shouldn't use the same rod for those two totally different applications. But when you match the right rod to the type of fishing you're doing, so we basically specialize in inshore fishing in bays, creeks, rivers. So if you have the right rod, which is generally going to be like a medium to medium heavy, depending on brand, because the rated system's all over the place, and a fast action tip, that is a game changer. And the fast action tip means that the bend is at the tip of the rod, and it just helps you effortlessly cast. Unlike a wet noodle rod that we call them, like it's almost like a fly rod where the whole rod bends. That's a very slow action rod. You just can't get the tip speed with spinning gear. Again, casting distance is all about all the reel does is get out of the way. And so you want that line to shoot out as efficiently as possible. So the thinner the line, the better, right? It's going to have less resistance going through the guides. There's going to be less drag on the line as it's swirling around and shooting through. And then tip speed. The tip speed at the rod is it. That's it. And so if you can maximize your tip speed and minimize the friction of the line going through the guides, that's it, right? And having the right rod does that, and the right line, right? The right line combined. And so just for many years, I would get a combo, and I was totally focused on the reel, and I would just get whatever rod came with it. And that's the exact opposite. I now focus everything on the rod, make sure that I have the right line, and then it's, hey, whatever reel is in stock that I can get my hands on. That's around a 2,500 or 3,000 size.
So the rod, to clarify all the stuff you said, the reel is basically just providing drag and letting line going in and out.
Right. Yeah. And basically the drag performance is the biggest one. And that isn't even a factor unless the rod did the core work, which is making the cast, feeling the strike, setting the hook, and then battling the fish alongside the reel. So yeah, just so many more benefits, so many more things the rod does, even though it's a relatively, simple tool without a ton of parts, but the actual how it lays and how it flexes is a really big deal.
Yeah. So to reiterate, the reel basically is taking line in and out. That's really all it does. And it's kind of worthless if the rod hasn't done its job first, which is making the accurate cast. And many times that far out cast, we've talked, maybe this is what we got to reiterate. You gave that example one time where you were on the boat with, let's just say me, and you're casting an extra 10 feet farther than me. We're on a flat where it's critical to be as far away, from these feeding fish from the 90-10 zone as possible. And so if you're able to cast 10 feet further, that means the boat can be back a little bit further. That means there's less chance that you're going to spook. And in a given hour, 2-hour day, if we're using artificial lures and making a lot of casts, in every single cast, you're casting 10 feet more than me in the strike zone, in the honey hole. That's like a football field every hour or two of the absolute best strike zone opportunities that you could get. And so that compounding effect, that's when it gets real. When you're like, holy smokes, no wonder Luke caught more fish than me. Like, he was in the feeding zone, like an extra football field length. And when it's all said and done, of that many opportunities, it's game changing. It's absolutely massive. So we got a cast. It's making the connection, right? You had a rod in your hand there where it's a little bit of exposure. I mean, you can actually feel the strike. You can feel small nibbles. Like, that's critical. A reel can't do that. Only the rod gives you the ability to actually feel that strike. And then the rod, 100% for the most part, is what sets the hook, right? It's not the reel. It's not your drag system. I mean, it's actually setting the hook and then fighting the fish. I remember, and you've been there with me too, you and Hollywood, we've been fighting some big fish the last couple of years. I mean, some monster hammerheads, tons of big sharks, some monster tarpon. That 150 pounder about whooped me on camera. And dude, if I had any lower of a rod, that was a $400 something rod, right? That Biscayne rod, it made all the difference in the world when you're fighting a fish. You have to have a strong rod. In those cases.
And even too for inshore fishing, it's been countless times where I'll take people out. They bring their gear, and they're clearly not casting as far, and I can see it, right? And basically, it usually gets to the point where I'm like, hey, like, I don't want to be like, hey, your gear stinks, but I'd be, hey, like, try this one out. Let me know what you think. And they'll like be sitting down a rod reel, it was like a Shimano Stratic, which now called Banford, like some like $230 reel plus an expensive rod, or just whatever rod they had, and they'll set that down and then pick up my combo, which both the rod and the reel are less than their reel only, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, this must be super expensive. It feels so nice. I'm casting so much further. And no, it's not. I rarely spend more than $100 on a reel, and even on rods, I'll go up to maybe 200 or sometimes more, just test them out. But I usually have my combos relatively inexpensive, but it's just about matching them properly. And when you do that, that's really the name of the game. And as far as, the budget, as we mentioned, the rod is most important. As far as the reel goes, if we're doing the typical inshore fishing where we're covering, bays and kind of a, relatively low current zones and like slot size redfish, 10-pound braid is all you need that casts an absolute mile. And when you're using a 10-pound line, the drag setting for that much line should only be 20 to 30% of your weakest line strength. And so the main line is going to be the weakest line strength. That's a 10-pound line. Let's just even say we do 30% of that, which is on the high end. That's only 3 pounds of drag that your reel needs to effectively fish. And every single reel out there, even the little kids reels on those little Disney little cartoon rods, they can handle 3 pounds of drag. So you really don't need to go out there and buy the super expensive reels. Just kind of get whatever fits the budget after you get the right rod for your needs.
Yeah, my rule of thumb, this is what I tell people in our insider club and my close friends and family who ask me for inshore fishing. Obviously, if you're offshore, near shore, doing something different, even casting, some of those nicer ones are more expensive. I say $100 is what you should be willing to spend for a reel. Because if you're getting the $50 ones, like some of these things suck. Like we've been buying them all, we've tried them all, and they don't hold up that long in salt water.
They'll work for a little bit, but they'll eventually cave.
Yeah, they actually feel good out of the box. A couple times, like, man, this is only $59. Like, this is a steal. And then all of a sudden, like, you start really feeling the drag after a few fish and or a little salt. And I'm not talking about like dunking it, just normal wear and tear. And it's like, no wonder. But $100, you usually get a pretty well sealed reel, an inshore spinning reel. So it's kind of the price, $100 on a reel. Shouldn't have to spend too much more. And this is a do as I say, not as I do, because I have an $800 reel. And it's kind of like someone a shoe expert tell my wife she should stick with, $80 shoes. And yeah, the majority of hers might be that. I don't even know how the cost, but she's still going to buy some nice ones. And you should too. It's fun to have some nice reels. But in general, if you have 10 reels, the majority of them, if you look at behind Luke and in my house, the majority of them are about that $100 range for a reel, and as high as I'd say $200 ish for a rod. We love the TFO. I think it's probably one of the best values, but you can tell a difference when you move up. Even in that Bull Bay, there's some demo ones that we've been now demoing with the mud hole for, gosh, it feels like a year now. It's actually the one Luke had in his hand earlier.
Here's one of them. Yeah, there's a noticeable difference.
Yeah, that's closer to like a $300 rod, and there's a massive difference. Like you can tell, and obviously by time we have it to our members and stuff, it's going to be a whole lot lower than that. But it with the components and how it's built, it's a very, very nice, expensive rod, and you can tell. Everyone you've had on the boat, including our cameraman, he's like, "Oh my gosh, like this feels like Excalibur. This is such a nice rod." There's a massive difference. So back to where I was going with this: $100 on the reel in general. It's all you really need, and then $150 to $200 on the rod is like kind of a sweet spot. I mean, you had that one that was at the G Loomis, or what's his new brand? The
Edge.
The Edge. It was like $450 or $500. Like, it is nice. You can tell a slight difference, but I can't tell any difference between that and let's just say the $280, $300 when you're holding your hand. Like that extra $100, I couldn't tell a difference.
Yeah, it's nominal. Just like most things, right? It'll get better and better, but does it get better? Does it justify the price increase? And that's something that's really on a situational basis. So you can't say for certain, but the core message is just to make sure the priorities are in line, and that priority is by far number one is the rod, and then let the reel be whatever the budget can handle after the proper rod is established.
Yep. And you will get better performance, and you will get more power. And I'm talking about like feeling good. Like you will actually be a more powerful angler. It is night and day. I mean, just remember that whole tennis or golf analogy. Most of you play one of those two sports. It is a massive difference when you get the right equipment. I mean, it's a massive, massive difference. Yeah, one other thing, I'll go for it, Luke.
I was going to say it gets more and more important as you're going to artificial lures, because that's where casting is king, right? Because the lure is not going to catch anything just sitting in the water, unless, in most cases, unless you have some really good scent on it. But it's really requires you to be able to deliver that lure efficiently and effectively, feel the strike, set the hook, and that's what the rod does. If you're like just a live bait fisherman or cut bait fishing, just basically letting the live bait or natural bait sit in the water and attract the strikes, that's where the rod isn't nearly as important, because all you have to do is be able to lob that bait out there and then just let it sit. And that's where the reel does most of the work, because most of the work will then just be fighting the fish. So again, it does come to application. What I found though is that I do the best where my setups that I always fish with the most, that are just more enjoyable to fish, are because I do live bait on occasion. But it feels better. It's just easier when I just go, I plan on doing artificial lures. I get a nice quality rod, a good enough reel, and that way I can excel with artificial lures, but then I can do great with live bait as well. So just wanted to specify it. But if you're just doing 100% live bait, nothing wrong with that. I was there for a while as well, thinking that I had to do it. The rod isn't nearly as important as with lures.
It's still important though. Don't discount it. But for artificial lures, it's critical. For live bait, it's not as critical. I mean, Peter Deeks is the number one thing that people mess up is not to be able to cast. It drives them crazy. It's not the hook set. And he's live bait guy. Because cut bait, yeah, you're right. You throw it out there and you have a beer and you wait. But Peter Deeks, I mean, he's basically using a lure, but it's a live bait. I mean, it's like, man, you have to cast it right in here. They're right under this mangrove line. And if you throw it up in the trees, because you're not a good caster, or if you're way over here, or you just can't get there because he doesn't want to spook these big fish, it's still a massive, massive deal. So one final thing is combos. Some people have given us some messages before saying, why do you guys hate combos? We don't hate all combos. Traditionally what happens in this industry is the combos that you see are nice reels or decent reels and crappy, horrible rods, the ones that they basically can't sell. That's what happens. And try to prove me wrong. Go to a big tackle store, a big box store. Most of the combos are crappy rods on a nice reel. So the reel is a whole lot more expensive than the rod. We'll probably have combos in our store at some point, probably next year, and it'll be the opposite, because there are good combos. If you can pair up a perfect balanced reel that's like $100 and a perfectly balanced rod that's $150, $200, you've got a machine there. That's a whole different ballgame. That's a legit combo. But that word combo in general, we always cringe because we've seen it. We've had people on our boats like, where'd you get it? Oh, I got a combo at ABC store. And like, oh my gosh, they basically just gave you the rod for free because it's a piece of crap. No wonder you're not catching any fish. So be very careful with combos. The combos are great for kids. I buy them for my kids at Bass Pro, Walmart, but I would never use a traditional combo that you see when the retailer is just, trying to sell you a reel and giving you a rod for free.
Yeah, I mean, just going out and getting a quality rod and putting a little kid's reel on it, right? If money's tight, you have just a super cheap reel for a little bit. That'll be way more effective than getting a nice reel and put it on a little really cheap rod.
Yep.
Just the feel is everything. It is such a big deal. I totally took it for granted for many years, and where I would go out and spend all my yard working money on the super nice newest Shimano reel that I was eyeing. And then I just got whatever rod I could fit in the budget. It was 100% of the time the rod was either probably about half the cost of the reel.
Yep.
And no telling how many fish it prevented me from catching. And I flat out didn't know, right? I just never really thought about it. And so that was really the purpose of this discussion, is just to really just hammer it home, where just don't make the mistake that we did.
Yeah. My first ones, when we finally got it, I was definitely on a budget. And I remember buying a St. Croix and a nice TFO. And I finally did the opposite. I spent more money on a rod. And remember back when Pfluger, that Presidente or whatever, had that massive sale. I don't know if they're going out of business or getting rid of that line, but like you could get those 3000 series Pfluger Presidentes for like $50. And so I loaded up on a couple, and that's what I used. So I had a $150 rod and a $50 reel. And like, that was some of the most fish I caught. Now things have changed, but prior to that, I was just the opposite. And I was like, man, it's all about the rod. It ain't about the reel.
Yeah, it's kind of like fly fishing, right? Where it's really, in that case, it's all about the rod. The rod does so much of the work, and then the line as well, and then the reel is just a distant third. But spin fishing is very similar, where that rod is really in charge of so many things. A lot of people, I get the question all the time, hey, how's that reel cast? And referring to a spinning reel. And the answer is pretty much, the same as all of them, right? All they do is just get out of the way. It's really about the rod and then what line you put on it.
Yeah. And we're not poo-pooing on expensive reels. We buy them. We've even given some out to our New Lifer members and stuff. Really nice reels will last a whole lot longer, right? I mean, we're not saying you should never buy it. It's junk. They're really nice. I mean, some of these things will last 20 years of some of these really nice reels. So it is nice to have that. But in general, because we're talking the general population, and a mistake that we're seeing over and over again if you can afford a $250 reel, awesome. Go buy at least a $250 rod to go with it. Don't do the opposite like we did. We'd buy these $200 reels, we'd save up all our money, and then the rod would be an afterthought, and we're wondering why we're not catching as many fish. So hope that was helpful. If you are in the market for a rod or reel or line, and you want to see all of Luke's line test and casting contests with which rods seem to work best in different situations, and obviously go to saltstrong.com, and up at the top you'll see a little search. You can, and we'll put some links obviously in the blog post as well. And then at fishstrong.com is our tackle store. And if you're an insider member, all 25,000 of us strong now, we all get up to 20% or more off everything in there. And so just one more reason to come join us as a member. We appreciate you guys so much. Got some really big things coming down the line, and including that rod that Luke was holding there in his hand for you guys watching. That should be out. Nothing's happening quick now with all the COVID and shipping and everything, but doggone, that thing is smooth like butter, and you will be blown away. You'll know exactly, like when you hold it and make the first catch, like, okay, I get it. Like this is, it's just like a really nice, if you've been fly fishing, you hold a really nice fly rod, you're like, wow, I can launch the sucker. It makes me feel powerful.
And for a proper setup, the rod really needs to be designed for a reel of a particular size. And so we're doing that, obviously, right? It's not, a mistake too is that, oh, if I get this rod, now all my needs are answered. It's really about the balance of the rod and the reel. And so we're going into great lengths to make sure that this rod's balanced. Like, this is just a prototype. The balance isn't exactly perfect. And so we're going to be adding some weight that we're actually adding weight to a rod, which is something that rod companies never do. And it drives me crazy that pretty much results in tip heavy rods, especially for the higher end ones. They're trying to justify how expensive their rod is for how light it is. And that's in many cases not good. You want it heavier in the butt in most cases than they are. Or you have to get a super heavy reel to balance it out properly. So with the combination we're going to have, it's going to be the lightest overall combination that's properly balanced. And that's really what we're doing.
Yeah, might even have a little place for a rattle cavity that you can pop rattles out, put them in lure real quick, kind of like a shotgun, have extra shells hanging out the back. Woo, boy. Now we got some cool stuff in line for that rod, and a lot of neat things coming, and that'll be only for insider members, especially in the beginning. We'll have access to this rod, and we're talking about doing something crazy, like even like $100 discount off, the first one, just to make it a complete no-brainer to be a member. And I mean, heck, it pays for your membership and then some right off the bat, and it will be the nicest rod you've had, unless you've ever bought a $400 or $500 rod. But it's up there. It is incredibly nice. So super pumped to be able to share that with you. Just one more reason to join us in the Insider Club over there at saltstrong.com. Otherwise, guys, we will see you on the next episode. We out. Peace. See ya.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our soul.